Welcome back. So, want to give an example now that we've talked through what a qualitative value model should look like, and we've talked in depth about value measures. An example to tie back to last lesson, this idea of dining out, going out for a night on the town, and how we'd look at that from the restaurant owner or restaurant manager's perspective. All right, so if we're starting at the top and working our way down, we'll start with our fundamental objective, which we took again from our functional hierarchy. And the fundamental objective for a restaurant is to provide a pleasurable dining experience for a night out, right, for their customers. That's what they're seeking to do. So we can then establish four, and I'm sure we could come up with many others, but four key functions. And our first function could be to attract the customers, right? We need customers to come in the door to actually serve food and eventually generate revenue. So we want to attract the customers. So one way we can do that is by maximizing cleanliness, right? So we can say we want high cleanliness, more is better type idea. We want to have a maximum level of cleanliness as possible. How do we measure cleanliness? There's not a direct way to measure, so what we'd say is we'd use a health score, right? Maybe from the health department, the food inspectors and health inspectors that come by. And that would be measured as we show here as in stars. So we could measure that in some type of star rating, and I'd say MIB, more is better. Moving on to function number 2, we have to feed the customer. Feeding the customer obviously needs to happen as part of a dining out experience. So we need to feed the customer. How do we accomplish that? We want to, from an objective standpoint, we want to maximize the variety. So we're saying we want to have the maximum number of options available to our customer that's coming in the door. How can we measure variety? Our value measure we tie to that, 2.1.1, would be menu choices, right? So think of a diner where they have tons of menu choices. We would just tally up the total number and again say more is better. Function number 3. So we already fed the customer. Now we also have to quench their thirst, right? So there's a whole lot of options we can do there. And one of the objectives could be maximize the variety again, right? So earlier we looked at food choices. Here we're looking at drink choices, or the drink menu. So our value measure tied to maximize variety for drinks would be number of drink choices, and we would tally up the total number. And again, we have a more is better type of idea. And then our fourth function is satisfy the customer. Okay, so we want to maximize the food quality, and we can measure food quality by a food quality rating. So we could go to potentially a Yelp or another app of your choice, right? And look at how they rate the food quality on there. We also have, in this case, a second objective, right? We want to minimize the frustration for our customers that are coming in the door. So if we want to minimize frustration isn't something we can measure. It's naturally occurring, but we do have maybe a service rating. So again, if we go to our favorite restaurant app or website, and I'll use Yelp as an example, there might be a service rating, right? So we could have a food quality rating in stars and a service rating in stars. Interesting to note on this last value measure, we said more is better for the service rating, even though we are seeking to minimize frustration. So you could have an objective that is to minimize frustration. So we want to have as low of frustration as possible, but to accomplish that, we need to maximize, or we need to have a more is better approach to our service rating in a star form. So we don't always need to totally align. So logically they should align, but there can be examples where you have your value measure needs to be higher to meet your minimize objective. All right, so now we're going to go into the world of weights. So measure weights are an important part of our value model. Once we build out our value model, just like we did there for our dining out approach, we then need to attach some measure or some weight to each of those value measures because they each contribute a different value to the system. Right? All of our value measures are not created equal, so we want to capture that by assigning weights. There's a lot of different ways to do that. The two we are going to cover in the course are the swing weight matrix, which is in the green book, your text, and then also pairwise comparison, which we will talk through today, which has some benefits in that you're able to compare one value measure to another. You don't have to do a holistic comparison. Now, the one underlying rule when we're talking about weights, no matter whether we're talking about swing weight matrix or pairwise comparison, your weights always need to sum to 1. So when we look at all of our possible weights, we should be able to tally them up and they should equal 1, because at the end of the day, our total value is equal to 1 times our value score. All right, so when we have, it doesn't matter if we have 4 weights or 40 weights, when we tally it up, that the weights need to sum to 1.